Hello and welcome to the Cream of Manchester's preview of this weekend's Premier League clash against Burnley. With us today, we have a guest who has been down in the pits of despair, through the mill and into the jaws of hell, and once saw his side lose 6-5 away at Grimsby. Host of the Burnley podcast from the Beehole End, journalist covering Burnley for 20 years, reports for the club, Lancashire Telegraph, and a fan since 1990 when Burnley were in the old 4th Division. It's Andrew Greaves. Andrew, thanks for joining us. I noticed you'd taken some glee from last night's events. Firstly, does that bode well for Burnley at the weekend, or are you more worried about the response now as opposed to catching us cold?
Yeah, well, first of all, Anthony, thanks for inviting me. Brilliant to get the invite. And I'm not sure you're capable of a response. I think that's the stage you're at, unless you get rid of hammering between now and 3 o'clock on Saturday. I mean, the tipping point, the kind of final bit for me was in with that magnetic tactics board. That to me was that's the end zone, isn't it? When there's nobody else around him and he's just doing it for himself and he looks manic. Mate, it's 3 points on Saturday just to take us 5 points clear of you lot, I think.
I think we need to go over with Roy and Pete and reflect on last night first of all. I sensed a downbeat apathy in the away end at Grimsby last night. And then there was a closed motorway and a 2-hour delay, adding to the woes of most shreds. We'll come to Pete first. How worried are you about the current circumstances? And is it time to hit the panic button already, Pete?
Well, first of all, I don't mind talking about it because I had an hour with my therapist this morning and he said, when things like this happen, it's so bad, it's best to talk them through with people who are sympathetic. I'm not sure I can put Andrew in that category yet, but I would say no, not to press the panic button. And if I can just come back to that briefly in a sec. I was at the other end, Anthony. I got a ticket through Grimsby's membership club about 20 minutes after the draw was made. I was surrounded by very happy, clappy people all night. It felt flat a bit from the United end. It certainly felt flat in that first 25 minutes. I said to somebody, I think we're setting woeful to a new level. The passing was dreadful, awful. Tried to claw it back end of the first half, but again, all credit to Grimsby, they kept coming at us and obviously won. I would say no. We can't hit the panic button as in sack the manager. We can't keep on sacking managers. Nobody's getting more than 2 or 3 years since Fergie went. Therein lies the problem. So we've got to stick with this guy. I thought he had to start this season a lot better in performances, not just results, after the way it ended so badly last season. So it started awfully. But let's give him till Christmas, I'd say, and then take a view of where we're at in terms of how we're playing and what the results are. And that's this Christmas.
How do you feel about that, Roy? Is it because it's unravelled quite quickly? I remember speaking to you 2 weeks ago. Going into the season, we're positive. Is it a case of tweaks are needed, or how do you feel about how quickly all of this has unravelled?
Well, the biggest worry is that he's totally inflexible. Now, that for leading a top world-class club is totally unforgivable. But the people who are unforgivable are the people who interviewed him in Lisbon. Because if it was one of us four, you would have said to him, right, exactly what you're going to do if you take over this team of Manchester United. Exactly what would you like? In all positions, the goalkeeper, you want 5 at the back, who are they? You want 2 in midfield, who are they? And you want whatever's left up front. Who do you want and how are you going to go about getting them? Because you cannot be inflexible. And I understand Pete's point is, again, very measured, always on the ball, but, it's inevitable. He is not going to change. And, you're going to have a good win, City away. I mean, we could get beat with Burnley or draw with Burnley on Saturday, and then you'd have your 2 weeks, and then you win 2-0 at City or 2-1 at City the next game. I know that sounds totally laughable, but that's what could happen. But the week after against Chelsea, they could be like they were against Fiorentina, and it's not going to change. I just don't see it changing. However, when you're investing so much these days in managers who they'll always bring 5 of the mates with them as well, so it's a big, big investment, and you give 200 million up to date for the same manager. It's very, very difficult. But you've only got to look at Thomas Frank, goes to Tottenham, who were in a worse position till the final whistle against us in Bilbao. And he's played 3 different systems. One where he's 2-0 up against the European champions with 10 minutes to go and draws but lost on penalties. He played a different system against Burnley at home when they won comfortably 3-0. He then played a different system at City where they won comfortably 2-0. That's flexibility with existing players in reality. And there's 1 or 2 managers around who would offer real alternatives, but we've been there before. Glesnier at Crystal Palace, you've got to look what he's done and achieved in life. The guy who can't pronounce at Bournemouth, who's very, very flexible, lost 1 centre half to Real Madrid, 1 to PSG, and a left back to Liverpool, and he can move players about. And then the one I like is Emery at Villa. But they're going to come with their own ways. I think they would come in and, except for the goalkeeping position, I think they would turn the present staff around just like that. Really would.
And I think there's a bit of a theme there across all 3, even though we don't agree on everything, where I do think that, this system is, it's very rigid, isn't it? And I think the worry for me is that when you're that rigid as well, teams can... I mean, City will already be... Well, we don't play them for another fortnight, but they'll already be looking at what to expect from us, and it'll be absolutely spot on because we're not going to change. So, yeah, it's not just the in-match thing that's, troubling me. It's the fact that teams know exactly what to expect, and with in these days of analysts and everything else, teams have weeks to prepare a plan, in relation to that as well. So yeah, I think we're all worried about how rigid it is. I think that's fair to say. I think we've kind of got a few mixed views on. We would probably want some assurances that there's going to be a bit more flexibility to what he's bringing. I think that's... Yeah. Just on the question of brainstorm, we had a range of intriguing questions about Burnley. So one of them included the safe style windows man. But before we come on to that generally, I just wanted to ask your thoughts on the following things, really. Andrew, so tell us about your strong affinity to Burnley and Lynx. You mentioned your first game was 1990. How have Burnley been during that time? I know they've most recently been in the Premier League, but tell us about the early days supporting Burnley and how you became to, get such a strong affinity to them.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a legal requirement, I think, in Burnley. I mean, it's everyone always jokes that you very rarely see kids in Liverpool, United, City shirts, and certainly back in 1990, you just didn't, barely anybody supported any other team despite us being in the 4th division. You get a few kids now wearing, City, Liverpool, Chelsea shirts. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, like, probably the same with you guys over different generations. That first time you're on there, and the first time was Rochdale, it's coming up to the 35th anniversary of that game in October. You just get mesmerised as a 6-year-old by the sights, the smells, the sounds, the floodlights coming on, and you hook straight away. And we won the 4th Division Championship the year after, the last ever winners of the 4th Division Championship, which for any viewers and listeners, there was a time before the Premier League. I know it sounds really kind of weird, but we used to play proper football before the Premier League and Sky came along, weirdly. I mean, in our case, it was 22 crab footballers slogging it out on muddy pitches, but it was kind of, I sometimes long for those days of honesty, the honest kind of football. We've had relegations and promotions pretty much the whole of that 35 years, really. You mentioned, most recently in the Premier League, we had that good stint under Sean Dyche, and then we've been up and down the last couple of seasons under Dyche, and then the company season, which is, better best forgotten. But yeah, all the way through, we've had a real strong upward trajectory. I still speak to some of the lads from that 90s team. I did a documentary a few years ago, and they say, just to be a single part of Burnley's history by winning that 4th Division Championship, at that point you never expected us to have this run over the last 15 years of whatever it is, 8, 9, 10 seasons out of 15 in the Premier League. It's a lot harder to get a ticket these days. I've got a season ticket, thankfully, nowadays, but certainly it's got harder to get a ticket, which is good. And, the razzmatazz that comes with having American owners, which you'll know all about, having had a leverage buyout, which you'll know all about. But it's good, I think this season we go into it with a bit more optimism. I think if you'd have asked us after the company season, I think we'd have all opted never to get promoted again, but just to keep winning the Championship and giving up his space in the Premier League. But I think under Parker, we've got I think that affinity, I think we can now identify with the players that he's got, which wasn't the case in that Premier League season under Company. So, we're perhaps on that little upward crest. It might not be enough to keep us up, but we're going to enjoy it this year as opposed to dreading it as we did under Company.
Yeah, and just to ask you about links with a couple of clubs. So first of all, your rivalry with Blackburn, and I think this is more my ignorance whilst I was young and during the 90s, but it was something that I never heard much about, but probably because the fixture never happened as often. But has that always been prevalent, or is that more of a new thing that's ramped up?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been prevalent, but I mean, from my point of view, I didn't see Burnley play Rovers until the early 2000s. Like, even then it was cup ties when Rovers were on the slide and they dropped down into, I think it would be Division 1 as opposed to the Championship then, when I think Graham Souness was boss of Blackburn and Stan Turnip was boss of Burnley, and they had the kind of edge over us, and they went this 38 years without Burnley getting a win, and you kind of go, well, we didn't play them for 17, 18 of those 38 years, but a few years we've had the upper hand. I mean, it's just the record against them is just ridiculous, and to win the Championship at Ewood Park, you kind of think we kind of threw one in against QPR to ensure that we could win it at Blackburn when we did under Vincent Kompany 3 years ago. I think for most Burnley fans, the rivalry is what it is. They're a bit of a irrelevance, I guess, now, because we're in two completely different zones in terms of where we're at, where we've been. But yeah, you're right, it is more of a modern thing. Certainly the last 20 years, when we've played them on a more regular basis, and even then, we've been in the Premier League, they dropped down to League One. We've avoided each other for so long. It's not like City United, it's not like Liverpool Everton, it's not like Spurs Arsenal. It's more like Birmingham City Villa to a certain extent, or Nottingham Forest Notts County. So yeah, we're quite happy that they're the noisy neighbours from down the road who don't get enough fans on to be that noisy, really.
Yeah, just on to, I wanted to press you on one thing actually, and it was the links with Manchester City at the moment. I think I saw that Burnley have been very successful in creating a goalkeeper with some reputation in James Trafford. Eyebrows are raised when you paid 20 million quid for him. That was seen to be a big risk.
Yeah.
Burnley took on all of that risk. They developed him into a great goalkeeper that was impressing all the top clubs.
Yeah.
And then he goes for 27.5 million. So what's the logic in, the 20 million fee, first of all, and then having a get out if the best case scenario happens of 27.5 million, leaving you with Martin Dubravka as you come up to the Premier League? That must be, is that something that's makes you pretty angry, or is that something that you expect?
It's a weird one really with Trafford, because I think, and this is all this kind of undisclosed fees into it. It's all this kind of, for PSR and all of this nonsense. I think the fee for Trafford initially was probably closer to 13 million. The fee now is probably closer to 25 million. I think City had that buyback clause. They also had a clause where if they could match whatever accepted bid from Newcastle, that would take priority. I mean, I think most Burnley fans would have driven Trafford back to the Etihad and left him outside the main road chippy after that season in the Premier League, and that's not necessarily a reflection on Trafford, but the way he was hung out to dry by Vincent Kompany, who really, I think, really misused him during that season. To go from League One to start in Premier League games, I mean, he was never really going to stand a chance. So yeah, I mean, I think we all knew Trafford was going to go. I think we expected him to go last year. He said on a podcast he wanted to go last year. He knuckled down. He was part of that team that kept clean sheets. He will be England number one. The arrival of Donnarumma probably, it was not on his bingo card. I think he probably expected to be understudy or competing with Edison this year, but then number one from next year. Donnarumma is only 26, amazingly, so he could be at City 5-6 years. Does that then stop him from getting through? So I think from our point of view, business is business. We might have made about 10 million quid on him. There's probably a good sell on. There's probably good bonuses if City win the Premier League, if he becomes England number one. I think from our point of view, the kind of moneyball strategy which we have, 5 or 6 of them 10, 12, 15 million pound profits is more than Burnley could have ever dreamed of. I also think it's the case as well that if you're Liverpool or you're Chelsea, you get 60 million quid for Trafford, or you get 45 million quid for Trafford. I think because you're Burnley, or you're Bournemouth, or your Wolves, you don't necessarily, and I know them clubs have started to get bigger fees, I don't think we get that. You know, we did it with Michael Keane, we did it with James, not James Tarkowski because he went on a free, did it with Dwight McNeil, Odobert, 32 million I think it was. That was good business, but I think as a smaller club, you're never going to command the same fees that you want. You know, we wanted 40 million for Trafford. We've probably got 25 guaranteed with add-ons. That might take it close to 35 or 40. But again, because everything's is hidden behind smoke and mirrors, we never have any idea of exactly how much players are going for, do we? And this is part of the problem with the lack of transparency.
No, I just thought it was sad that, because I looked at his form last year. I saw a really promising goalkeeper.
Superb,
there.
yeah.
And you know, to go from that with Burnley without a goal, well, not without a goalie, but he's certainly nowhere near as good as James Trafford at his best. You know, it's just sad that you come into the Premier League, you lose your goalkeeper.
He's probably what we need, though, is Dubravka. We probably need experience rather than really good goalkeeper. You know what I mean? I know that sounds really stupid, but we need somebody who's, you know, got the experience to knuckle down when things aren't going well on a run like we've got at the start of the season, where we play you guys, we play Villa, we play City, we play Liverpool. You know, we played Spurs already. You know, there's not many winnable games on paper in that run. You know, if Trafford had started and he has, you know, and we're winless by the time we play Leeds, that damages him, and it probably damages us because we've not learnt from last time. We didn't bring in that experienced goalkeeper. So I'm looking at it the other way, if I'm honest, Anthony, that kind of Dubravka or Ortega, I think we're linked with, or a Sam Johnson, they're probably the kind of goalkeeper we needed as a side, rather than this brilliant Rolls Royce of a goalkeeper or potential Rolls Royce of a goalkeeper.
So Burnley's a small church, I think it's fair to say, but you've got some very famous fans. So I wanted to ask, in your travels and your work, have you come across any of the prominent Burnley supporters, such as, I had King Charles. Do you know much about that?
I've heard of him. I think he's quite relatively well known, but
was that the last King Charles? King Charles II?
King Charles
No,
II, yeah. No, the current one is a Burnley fan. He does a lot of work in Burnley. He has some charity offices here, I believe, so a lot of his work through the Prince's Trust happened in Burnley, and I think we still send him a golden season ticket every year. Not that I ever see him at the Royal Dice or anything before the game, or Hatter's Bar where I drink, but he does get a season ticket, and apparently he tells people that, you know, if they ask him who his favourite football team is, he does say he keeps a close eye on Burnley. So yeah, we have to take his word
along
for it.
Along with Chesney from Corrie, James Anderson, Alistair Campbell. On the other end of the scale, we had the safe style Windows man.
Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, he's good. I know Jeff. Yeah. I know Jeff really well, actually. I used to go out with Jeff on nights out, because I used to DJ and he used to compare at a little club in Burnley. And you will not believe the amount of female attention that guy gets.
Is he really into it then, Burnley, though? Not female attention, but Burnley.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, I think he was a match day host for a while at Burnley. But yeah, big Burnley fan is Jeff. Been watching him for years. You know, stood on the terraces for years and years in the 80s and stuff like that. But yeah, he's a big Burnley fan. He's Jeff, and yeah, he's a character. Let's say, very much so. And
last one, what one of our usual guests, wanted to ask is, what was the White Lives Matter banner all about, and is that, you know, why Burnley?
Yeah, I mean, you know, people attach themselves to certain causes, and you know, I don't think it necessarily gets shone the best light on the town. You know, we just appointed at that point, or we were about to appoint Vincent Kompany as the kind of first black manager that we'd had. You know, I think the guy who did it obviously had his reasons for doing it. I don't think it's indicative of Burnley as a place. I don't think it's indicative of Burnley as a fan base. And, you know, quite rightly, Ben Meehan, you know, as a former player, spoke out against it and basically said, look, Burnley's not like that. You know, if you want to spunk whatever it costs on an aeroplane to fly a tardy banner over a football match, then you know, fair play to you. You know what I mean? It's your money. It's a bit of a waste of energy from my point of view. You know, on something which is, it's there to divide people and football, or without getting all kind of gooey-eyed, football is something that brings everyone together, isn't it?
Yeah, we once wasted one on David Moyes as well. So yeah, that was
not cheap either, are they? I don't think.
I can imagine. No. And just to say, when I say we, I mean one person who I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean United, yeah. I didn't want people thinking then that I'd been funding planes over Old Trafford about David Moyes, because I hadn't. I'm going to come on to Roy and Pete now, because this is a fixture with a long history. I wanted to know, can you tell us about its roots, how the rivalry's changed over time, and when it peaked? Because I think it's got more of a rivalry in the past than maybe modern times, even though we play Burnley quite a lot recently.
Andrew's talked there about the last 20 years, the 35 years you covered, when you've been very much, you've taken a yo-yo club expression to its extreme, really. I was just looking before we came on. They don't set us homework for this podcast, believe it or not, but I knew you'd been up and down a lot in the last 10 years, but I hadn't realised it had been almost season after season. You've gone from Championship top 1 or 2 into the Premiership, and then relegated almost each season. Amazing. But when I was growing up, Burnley were a good old-fashioned English club with a great tradition. Won the league a couple of times, the cup once, I think. You touched on the support they get in the town. You're right. I never see in or around Burnley a shirt other than Burnley's football shirt. And I think you've got the best per capita support in the country.
Be, I think,
something like 21,000 fans that attend, but your population's only about 80,000. I don't mean to sound patronising, but it is really good. That is incredible. But great old ground, Turf Moor, when it's rocking, when it's the home fans or the away fans. Love going there. First went in '67. One of my very first away matches on my own without my dad. Burnley seemed a long way then. We went on a coach for about an hour, but it seemed like I'd gone halfway around the world. Frank Casper scored for Burnley, I think, Andrew, and I think Sadler for United. 1-1 drawn on the way to us winning the league. But after that, lot of great games against Burnley in the league and in the cup. We've also had some great players go between the two clubs. We were very fortunate, I'm sure Roy will back me up on this, in the 60s to get, first of all, John Kennelly from Burnley, who'd won a title with Burnley, and then Willie Morgan, of course, who served United well. Doesn't always get the credit it deserves historically, but Willie Morgan stayed with United after they fell from grace of winning the European Cup in '68 into the second division, and helped us back. It could easily have gone. When you think of some of the attitudes today we've got in and around the club, we could do with a few more Willie Morgans in that sense, in terms of loyalty. So there'll be a great, a good old Lancashire derby it used to be, and I think it would be a great atmosphere on Saturday, 3:00 kickoff. Who doesn't want that? Burnley fans will be singing their heads off, and I think we will as well. But we've just been really kicked where it hurts in this opening 3 games, so anything could happen.
Roy, you've got a lot of experience with this fixture, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I'm surprised Pete didn't mention Colin Waldron then, but that was a famous signing as well. Yeah, I first saw Burnley. The first time I actually saw them was 1957.
Wow.
But I mean, they were a great team when I was a young lad. I mean, without looking anywhere, Colin MacDonald in goal, Ali Kelder, a tremendous fullback, Jimmy Adamson, one of the great English wing guards, Tommy Cummings, Men Miller, Connolly, Jimmy McElroy, who without a shadow of a doubt would stand alongside any inside forward or one of these floating number 10s or 8s that Amrin keeps talking about. Ray Pointer, centre forward, Jimmy Robson, and Brian Pilkington, and a guy called Trevor Meredith as well, who scored the goal at Burnley at Main Road when they won the title. I met Trevor Meredith a few times, and Jimmy Robson and Brian Pilkington at Sporting Memories, which I'm heavily involved in. So they were a truly great side. But from Manchester United's point of view, the game I really remember because I went to it was 1957, the Monday, and we'd won 3-1 on Good Friday at Burnley. Billy Whelan got a hat-trick. And I went on Easter Saturday, we played Sunderland, 4-0 and won the second successive league title under the Busby Babes. And on the Monday, Busby did something he never ever did, but he did it on the Monday because we were playing Real Madrid in the second leg of the European Cup. on a Thursday night, believe it or not. Coming up, and this is Easter Monday, we just won the title, and he left 9 players out of his team. But in those days, the Busby Babes had a number 2 who could automatically replace the number 2. They had Ian Greaves, they had Jeff Bent, they had Freddie Goodwin, they had Jackie Blanchflower, they had Wilf McGuinness, they had Kenny Morgans, they had Bobby Charlton, they had Alec Dawson, they had Mark Pearson, they had Albert Scanlon. They had everything except a replacement goalkeeper. And he made 9 changes. And Bob Lord, who always had a dislike for United, going back to, he was a big prominent member of the Football League. And he was one of the group who said that United should not enter the European Cup. And we played 9 reserves, and we actually beat Burnley's first team 2-0. And Bob Lord went ballistic, saying that United had brought the game into disrepute. And of course, we played them March 1958, a month after the crash, and Burnley won 3-0. And it was a very, very difficult game. Mark Pearson got sent off. Bob Lord called United a load of teddy boys, and he actually said it's about time the country stopped mourning the Munich disaster. This was March 1958. So he didn't really go down very well in the United history. Pete mentioned Willie Morgan before, and I got to know Willie very well. I was on his testimonial committee, and Willie told me about a game in 1963 when Burnley beat United 6-1 at Turf Moor at Christmas. And he laid on 4 goals, all scored by Andy Lockhead. And 2 days later, they played at Old Trafford. And Matt Busby actually rang Belfast after the Burnley defeat and told young George Best to get back to Manchester because he was going to play his second ever game for United. And he did. And Willie Anderson made his debut. And United won 5-1, and Best was never, ever out of the team again. And Willie said to me, after about 2 minutes, the ball came to me, I've trapped it. Next minute, Noel Campbell sends me higher than I've ever gone in the world. And I had a very quiet second game after what had happened at Turf Moor. Do you want me to continue? So Burnley in my youth were one of the clubs, and Bob Lord brought a lot of animosity from a United point of view, particularly. And I loved, like Pete mentioned, travelling over the moors, Rottenstall, all them miles and miles away, and arriving at Burnley Turf Moor. My first visit was actually in 1960, and I remember going 63 just before the FA Cup final. But again, Pete mentioned it before. Great tradition, a great Lancashire name, and United and Burnley. I'm glad we're both in the same division. Have I
Brilliant.
gone?
No, great stories there, Roy. And just a last question there. How did you get to Burnley when you went in 1960? What was that like, a car or?
No, the X43 Ribble. What an X40. And it's still going, the
Still
X43
going,
Ribble.
yeah, yeah.
But, yeah, I wasn't a train man. I used to collect bus numbers. Oh, and that was a cracker. Used to go on to Skipton, I think. Oh, what a bus that was. It was a cream, full-fronted bus. Wow. That was before I really imagined what the word orgasm meant. But seeing the cream buses going to Burnley was a joy.
Yeah. Well, just back to Andrew then. So I sensed a little bit of, I wouldn't say negativity, a bit of acceptance around your chances this season. Obviously, Burnley have becoming a bit of a regular candidate to relegation. Are you expecting the same, or are you optimistic that Burnley can sort of get out of trouble this year?
Yeah, a lot more optimistic, I think. I think, in Scott Parker, we've got a manager who has pragmatism, has flexibility, all of these words that Pete and Roy were talking about Amarin not having, not welded to a system. I mean, I think under Company we had very similar to Amarin what we'd call a philosophy manager, a system manager. You've got the lad at Rangers, if he's still at Rangers by the time this comes out. He's the ultimate. Russell Martin is the ultimate philosophy manager. Even after they get spanked by Club Brugge last night, 6-0, 9-1 an aggregate, this is part of the journey. This is with Scott Parker, he's been there, he's screwed it up, he's learnt from his lessons. He threw his toys out of his pram at Bournemouth, got him potted, struggled at Fulham, because of inflexibility and trying to do it. We are going into it with, I think we went into the company season with optimism. I think I did something for TNT Sports and I was like, yeah, top 10, we'll be fine, we're going to walk it. And actually, you saw the first lineup, and we'd got Trafford in goal, Kolyosha, who we've just farmed out to Espanyol, starting, and you're going, this guy's just put a load of kids in, we're just lambs to the slaughter. I think it took us 11 games to stop getting beat that season or to get his first win. Got his first win, I think that's important for the 3 promoted clubs. I think unlike the last 2 seasons where the bottom 3 have gone down, that mini league of 3 where even if you win it, you're still going down, I do think this year is a mini league of 7. I think Wolves, I think Brentford possibly, West Ham certainly. I think Palace and Forest when European football really kicks in. I think Forest have made some good signings. Palace struggle for signings. I know you guys drew with Fulham last week, but I think they've only brought in a reserve goalkeeper. That mini league of 3 suddenly becomes a mini league of 7. You've got to finish 4th bottom of that mini league, and that's, this year I'm thinking 16th, 17th. In essence, I'd be happy to stay up on goal difference on the last game at season, 17th. It's not very ambitious, but let's not run before we could walk, really.
We're really flattered there that you've not called it a mini league of 8 there, Andrew.
Well, I thought had you not been beat by Grimsby last night, I might have included you lot in there. But this is the thing. You ain't going to be top 4, but something's got to happen. Something's got to change. Whether that's the manager or he gets a rocket to say you brought these players in, play a system that works. You'll be all right. You won't be in that mini league, I don't think. Caveat that with.
Just a bit of a follow-up there. So, do you feel your team's in a better shape this year than it was last time you came up?
Yeah, there's more balance.
Yeah.
So I think, we were very winger-heavy. We are still quite winger-heavy, although we will lose a couple of those over the next, 3 or 4 days. I think some of the kind of key signings, really, Walker, been there, won it, key position. Leslie Ugochukwu is the kind of rangy box-to
Drew,
just ticking over the half hour, so we'll just do a round of predictions before we close. Do you fancy United to win this weekend? What score are you going for?
Well, sadly, I thought it was going to be a draw before last night. I really did, because I just don't see any change. And unless United score first, I think it's going to be. I went the last time it came. It was it 1-1, 0-0, 1-1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sadly going to be 1-1 because I just can't see how we're going to change in the 48 hours.
Pete?
glass always half full for me, Anthony, and I'm hoping the strikers will settle down. We've done this under other managers, especially Fergie when he bought a lot of players in '89. They can look like chumps to start with, but once it settles down, these guys have got to be the good goal scorers, Cunha and Mbueno and Sesko. So I'm going for 3-1 for Man United to beat Burnley.
Yeah, I'm going 2-1 Man United. And lastly, Andrew, you sort of fancied your chances before. By what scoreline? Thanks for joining us. Like and subscribe yourself. Senseless, please. If you support us, we can improve. Email creamofmanchester1878@gmail.com or find us on all the socials. Thanks a lot to Roy and Pete and our special Burnley guest, Andrew Greaves. Really appreciate your time. Next up, we'll be back over the international break to hopefully reflect on United's recovery from capitulation. Bye for now.